Hi everyone, in this video we are on page 3 of the notes going over our next section, factor and cancel. So we're going to start this problem like we did the last ones and just say I'm going to pretend that I don't know if this has restrictions or not, and I'm just going to go ahead and plug in 0 for x. So what is f of 0? I plug in 0 and I get 4 times 0 squared minus 5 times 0 all over, all over 0. Folks, 0 divided by 0 again is what we call indeterminate, and it is also undefined. So f of 0, DNE, it does not exist. The function is not defined there. Now, it could be that there's an asymptote there. It could be there's a hole there. Or maybe it's like the square root function where it's like, hey, the limit doesn't exist because it's not even going to get over to that imaginary stuff to the left. So we have to be a little bit savvy when we go to try to figure out the limit for this. So first, let's go back to our equation, and using our knowledge of unit 4, do we know if this function has a restriction? Absolutely. We see that we are dividing, and we are dividing by x, so that means that x can't be equal to 0. That is a restriction. Now, we don't know if it's a whole or vertical asymptote until we factor and possibly cancel. So if we can cancel the factor, that tells me we have a whole, and that we'll be able to find the limit. If it can't cancel, then we have to use our calculator. So factor and cancel, whole. The limit equals the y value of the whole. If it can't cancel, then we're going to use our calculator to figure out graphically what is going on with that function. So let's go ahead and try to factor this one. So can I factor the top of this expression? Always the first thing we check for when factoring is a GCF, and that is what I can do to factor the top. So we take out a GCF and ta-da! We see that the restriction factor will cancel out. So that means we've got a whole. And you may remember doing this back in Unit 4. To find the corresponding y value of the whole, we plug into the canceled version of our equation. So I always call the canceled version c of x. So our canceled version, if we were able to just cancel out that restriction, would be 4 times x minus 5. So then c of 0 would be equal to 4 times 0 minus 5, or just negative 5. So folks, what does this mean for us? It means that 0 is a restricted value. Our function does not exist there, but the location of the whole is at 0, negative 5. So I am not defined there, does not exist, restricted x value, but where the location of that whole is at 0, negative 5. So that means even though I don't actually reach this negative 5 value, that's going to be what my function is approaching. So f of 0 does not exist, but the limit is equal to the y value of the whole. And I think it would be beneficial to see what the graph of this looks like. Remember, our calculator does not do a good job of showing holes, but this is just going to help us do the shape of this graph. So 4x squared. So you don't have to do this. This is just so you can get a visual picture of what's going on. There we go. Hey, and actually, we can see the break fairly decently there. It actually does look like there's a disconnect there. So where does it look like we have that hole? Right at 0, -5. So as we approach 0 from the left, and as we approach 0 from the right, what y value are we approaching, even though we don't actually get there, even though we aren't actually defined there? We're approaching the hole's y value at -5. So again, folks, we're trying to do this without our calculator, but I just wanted to give you kind of a visual of what's going on with that graph and why we have a hole there and why we are approaching that y value of -5. So folks, we're gonna go ahead and look at the next one. So starting with, does this function have any restrictions? Sure does. We are dividing, so x can't be equal to -7 because that would make this dividing by 0. Next, we're going to try to factor and cancel it to see if we have a hole or a vertical asymptote at that restricted value. So I'm going to do the x method. We've got 2x squared plus 13x minus 7. So product of 2x squared, 1x and 2x. Product of 7, let's do 7 and 1. That gives me 1x, that gives me 14x. So in order for me to get a sum of 13x, we need the 1 to be negative, and we thus need this one to be negative, making sure that our product number is working out. 7 times -7 times -1 is -7, so we're good to go there. So then our factors are x plus 7 and 2x minus 1. So x plus 7 and 2x minus 1. So can we cancel that restriction factor? Sure can. So that means we have a hole. To find the y value of that hole, we are going to plug -7 into that canceled equation. So our canceled equation is the 2x minus 1. So plugging that -7 in, we would get -15. So we have a hole at -7, -15. So let's see if we can answer the two questions. What is f of -7? It's not the same as the canceled version of the equation of -7. F of -7 does not exist. -7 is a restricted value, so at that x value, there's nothing there. There is that open dot hole. So f of -7 does not exist, but the limit of the function as we approach -7 from both directions is going to be equal to the y value of the hole. So -15. And that concludes page 3 of the notes.